In PHP, constants are quite similar to variables, but there's one major difference. Once you define a constant, its value cannot be changed throughout the script. This means constants are used when you need to store a value that must remain the same during the execution of your program. Now, let's break it down. A constant is a term that identifies a single value. Once the constant has been defined, it stays fixed. You can think of it as a locked container. Once it's sealed, you can read what's inside, but you can't modify it. Unlike variables, constants in PHP do not start with a $sign. Instead, they are defined using either the define function or the const keyword. For example, in the image, you can see a simple PHP script that defines a constant using the define function. The line of code says, define, site name, financial freedom fx. This command tells PHP to create a constant named site name and assign it the value financial freedom fx. After defining it, you can display the constant's value anywhere in your script simply by writing echo site name. When this code runs, it will print the text Financial Freedom FX on the screen. There are also a few important rules to remember. A constant name must begin with a letter or an underscore. It cannot start with a $sign like variables do. Once declared, constants are automatically global, which means they can be accessed anywhere in the script, inside or outside of functions, without needing to pass them as parameters. You can also use the constant function to retrieve the value of a constant dynamically by passing its name as a string. However, in most cases, simply using the constant name directly, like site name, is more common. Constants provide a way to store values that should never change during program execution, such as database credentials, API keys, or site names. The define and const methods are the two main approaches, and they both ensure your value remains consistent, secure, and globally available throughout your PHP script. Now that you've understood how to create a PHP constant using the define function, let's move one step further and explore another way to declare constants, by using the const keyword. In PHP, there are two main ways to define constants: using the define function, which we've already discussed, using the const keyword, which is more commonly used inside classes or when you want to declare constants at compile time. Let's start with the syntax of the const keyword. You simply write .const site name, financial freedom fx. Here, const is the keyword, site name is the constant name, and financial freedom fx is the value. Unlike variables, you do not use a $sign before a constant name, so no site name, just plain site name. If you want to print or display this constant, you can write echo site name. When this code runs, it will display financial freedom fx. Now let's compare both methods, define and const. The define function can be used anywhere in your script, even inside conditional statements or functions, because it is executed at runtime. On the other hand, the const keyword is a bit stricter. It must be declared at the top level of your code, outside of functions or conditional blocks, because it is defined at compile time. For example, if true, define author Huzaifa Rashid. Echo author. This will work perfectly fine because defined is evaluated at runtime. But if you try the same thing using const, like this, if true, kes const author, Huzaifa Rashid, it will throw an error, because constants defined with const cannot be placed inside conditions. Another important difference is in scope. Constants defined with const can be used inside classes, which makes them useful in object-oriented programming. For example, class website, const name, financial freedom fx, echo website, name. Here, the const keyword defines a constant inside a class, and we access it using the scope resolution operator. That's the double colon. When you run this code, it will output financial freedom fx. In simple words, use define for general constants that you want to use across your entire script. And use const when you're working inside classes or need compile time constants. Both methods help make your code cleaner, more structured, and easier to maintain, because constants give your program fixed reference points that never change, just like solid foundations in your code. Let's now understand the parameters of the define function in detail. The define function in PHP accepts 3 parameters: name, value, and case-insensitive. Each one plays a specific role in how the constant behaves in your code. Let's go through them one by one in a smooth and clear way. The first parameter is name. This defines the name of the constant. It must always be written as a string and enclosed in quotation marks. For example, PI or site name. The name is what you'll use later in your program whenever you want to access the constant's value. For example, define PI 3.14159. Here, the word PI is the name of the constant. The second parameter is value. This specifies the actual value that will be assigned to the constant. It can be a string, a number, a Boolean, or even an array in newer versions of PHP. Once the value is assigned, it cannot be changed. In the previous example, the value is 3.14159, which represents the mathematical value of pi. Here's another example. Define greeting. Welcome to Financial Freedom FX. In this case, the value is a string. Welcome to Financial Freedom FX. The third and final parameter is case-insensitive. This is an optional parameter, and it determines whether your constant name should be case-sensitive or not. By default, it is false, which means that constant names are case-sensitive. If you set it to true, then you can access the constant using uppercase or lowercase letters. Both will work. For example, define greeting, hello world. True. Now you can call it as greeting, greeting, or even greeting, and all of them will return the same result. Hello world. However, it's important to note that case-insensitive constants are not recommended in modern PHP coding practices. In fact, newer PHP versions have deprecated this feature because it can lead to confusion and inconsistency in your code. So it's always better to keep constants case-sensitive, just like variable names. To summarize this section, the name defines what your constant will be called. The value defines what information the constant will hold. And the case-insensitive parameter decides whether you can access the constant in different cases. Each of these parameters together makes the define function powerful, flexible, and easy to use when you need fixed, unchangeable values in your PHP scripts. Now let's look at an example that demonstrates how a case-sensitive constant works in PHP using the define function. In the image, Code Snippet 30 shows a very clear and simple example. The code starts with the PHP opening tag, PHP, and inside it, a constant is defined using the define function. The syntax is written as define hello, what's new in PHP 8. Echo hello? Let's break this code down step by step in a smooth and easy way. Here, the first line defines a constant named hello. Notice that the constant name is written in all uppercase letters. This is a common convention when naming constants in PHP, as it helps differentiate them from variables. The second parameter inside the define function is the value of the constant, which in this case is the string. What's new in PHP 8? This means that the constant hello now permanently holds this text value throughout the script. The next line, echo hello, is used to display the value of the constant. When the PHP interpreter executes this code, it replaces the constant hello with its assigned value and prints it to the screen. So, the output will be, what's new in PHP 8? This example demonstrates how constants in PHP are case-sensitive by default. That means if you try to use the same constant name in a different case, such as echo hello or echo hello, a PHP will throw an error saying that the constant is undefined. Only the exact case, in this example, hello, will work. This behavior ensures consistency and accuracy in your code, preventing accidental overwriting or misuse of constant names. Now, there's also something new and important about this in PHP 8. In earlier versions of PHP, You could make constants case-insensitive by setting the third parameter in the define function to true. For example, define greeting, hello world, true. This would allow you to call the constant as greeting, greeting, or greeting. However, in PHP 8, this feature has been completely removed. Constants can only be case-sensitive, and trying to use the third parameter for case insensitivity will cause a warning or error. This change was made to make PHP more consistent and predictable. Having constants behave in one uniform way, always case-sensitive, reduces confusion and improves code readability. So, to summarize this example, the constant hello is created using the define function. It stores the string what's new in PHP 8. The output of the program is exactly that text. And from PHP 8 onward, all constants are strictly case-sensitive, which is now the only accepted behavior. This makes your PHP code cleaner, more secure, and easier to maintain in modern development environments. Now let's move into a new and exciting update introduced in PHP 8.0.13, which is the ability to create constant arrays using the define function. Before PHP 8.0.13, constants were mostly limited to simple data types, such as strings, numbers, or booleans. But now PHP allows you to define arrays as constants too. This feature makes your code much more flexible and organized, especially when you want to store a group of related constant values under one name. Let's look at code snippet 31 shown in the image. The code begins with the PHP opening tag, peep, and then the define function is used to create a constant array. Here's the code. Define cars, Alfa Romeo, BMW, Toyota, Range Rover. Echo cars? The constant is named cars, and its value is an array containing 4 elements: Alfa Romeo, BMW, Toyota, and Range Rover. Each of these represents a different car brand. When we use echo cars, PHP accesses the first element in the array because, just like regular arrays, constant arrays are indexed starting from 0. That means cars refers to the very first value, which is Alfa Romeo. So, when this script is executed, the output displayed on the screen will be Alfa Romeo now. This is very powerful because it allows you to store multiple constant values together without having to define each one separately. For example, before PHP 8.0.13, you would have to write something like this. Define car1 Alfa Romeo. Defini car2 BMW. Defini car3 Toyota. Define car4 Range Rover. But now, with array constants, you can define all of them in one clean and simple line of code using an array, which makes your script easier to read, shorter, and more efficient. It's also important to note that, just like single-value constants, array constants defined using the define function are global and immutable. This means they can be accessed from anywhere in your PHP script, and once set, the array elements cannot be modified, replaced, or deleted. For example, if you try to change the value of one of the array elements like this, cars, fucked, Mercedes, PHP will throw an error because constants, even when they are arrays, remain fixed once defined. So, to summarize this part, in PHP 8.0.13 and above, the define function can now create constants that hold arrays. This feature makes it possible to group multiple related constant values together, improving code clarity and reducing repetition. In our example, the array constant cars stored multiple car names, and by echoing cars, we successfully displayed Alfa Romeo as the output. This enhancement shows how PHP continues to evolve, bringing modern features that make coding more efficient, clean, and developer-friendly. Now let's move into the topic of global constants in PHP, which is shown in this image. Constants in PHP are global by default, meaning once you define a constant, it can be accessed and used anywhere in your program, even inside functions, classes, or included files, without needing to pass it as a variable. Let's carefully go through code snippet 32 step by step to understand this behavior. The code starts with the PHP opening tag, PHP. Then we use the define function to create a constant named hello, and we assign it the value. What's new in PHP? So the first line looks like this. Define hello. What's new in PHP? Now, after defining this constant, we create a simple function called myTest. Inside this function, we write a single statement, echo hello. Finally, we call the function by writing myTest. And then we close the PHP tag with. So, the complete code looks like this. PHP define. Hello. What's new in PHP? Function myTest. Echo hello. MyTest. Now let's break down what's happening here in smooth, detailed narration. Even though the constant hello is defined outside the function, that is, in the global scope, it can still be accessed inside the function without any extra keyword like global. That's because constants in PHP are automatically global across the entire script. You don't need to declare them inside functions again. Once a constant is defined, it becomes accessible everywhere. So when the myTest function is called, it executes the line echo hello. PHP looks for the constant hello, finds its definition, and prints its value on the screen. The output of this code is, what's new in PHP? To explain this in a simple and smooth way, imagine constants in PHP as global reference points in your script. Once you set them, they're available for the entire program, no matter where you try to access them. That's one of the biggest advantages of using constants. They don't have local or block-level scope like variables do. For example, if you create a variable inside a function, it will only exist inside that function. You can't use it outside. But if you create a constant, you can use it anywhere, even inside or outside functions, and PHP will recognize it. Here's a small comparison for better understanding. If you define a variable like this, hello, what's new in PHP? And then try to use it inside a function without declaring it as global, it won't work. But with define, hello, what's new in PHP? It will always work because constants are globally recognized by PHP. So, to summarize this part, constants in PHP exist on a global scale. Once defined, they can be accessed anywhere in your script, inside functions, classes, or included files. You don't need to use the global keyword for constants. They are automatically available to every part of your program. In our example, the constant hello was defined outside the function, but used successfully inside it. The final output displayed on the screen is, what's new in PHP? This feature makes constants incredibly useful for defining fixed values, such as configuration data, database credentials, or site-wide settings that you'll need to use repeatedly across your entire PHP script. Now let's discuss one of the most interesting and powerful features in PHP known as magic constants. In PHP, there are certain predefined constants whose values automatically change depending on where they are used in the script. These are called magic constants. The reason they're called magic is because their values are not fixed. They change dynamically based on the context of your code. For example, when you use a magic constant inside a function, it may display the function's name. But if you use the same constant outside of any function, it might show something completely different, such as the file name or the line number. Magic constants in PHP are case-insensitive, which means you can write them in uppercase or lowercase, and PHP will still recognize them. There are 9 main magic constants in PHP, and 8 of them begin and end with double underscores, that is, 2 underscores before and after the constant name. Let's list them out first. Line, file, direct function, class, trait, method, namespace, and class, name, class, now. Let's understand what each of them does in smooth, clear language. First, we have line all. This magic constant returns the current line number in the file where it is used. For example, if you write echo tag line on line 10 of your PHP file, it will output 10. This is extremely useful for debugging because it helps you know exactly where your code is running. Second, we have min file wheeze. This constant returns the full path and file name of the current file. So if your PHP file is located in c.example.docs in project.windex.php, this constant will output that exact path. Third, we have dir a. This constant gives the directory of the current file without including the file name itself. In the previous example, it would output c.example.docs project. Fourth, we have function a. This one displays the name of the current function. If you call it inside a function, it will print that function's name. If you use it outside of any function, it will return an empty string. Fifth, we have a class e. This constant shows the name of the current class. If you use it inside a class, PHP will return the class name. It is very handy when you are working with object-oriented programming. Sixth, there's trait I. Traits are reusable pieces of code in PHP that help with code sharing between classes. The bucket trait I constant returns the name of the current trait in which it is used. Seventh, we have a method. This constant displays the name of the current class method. It combines both the class name and the method name, giving you a clear reference to where you are inside your code. Eighth, we have namespace, yao. This constant returns the current namespace name. Namespaces in PHP are used to organize classes, functions, and constants, and this constant helps you identify which namespace your code belongs to. Finally, the ninth magic constant is className.class. This returns the fully qualified class name as a string. For example, if you have a class named car and you write echo car class, it will output the string car. Now here's something very important. Unlike regular constants, which are resolved at runtime, all magic constants are resolved at compile time. That means PHP determines their values before the code is actually executed. This makes them fast, efficient, and extremely useful for debugging, logging, and managing large projects where you need to know exactly what file, class, or function your code is running in. To summarize this in smooth voiceover style, magic constants in PHP are predefined constants that automatically change their values depending on where they're used. They help developers identify file names, line numbers, functions, classes, and namespaces easily. There are 9 magic constants in total, 8 of which begin and end with double underscores. And all of them are evaluated by PHP at compile time, not during runtime. These magic constants make PHP smarter and more context-aware, helping you write cleaner, more informative, and more powerful scripts. Let's move toward the summary section that wraps up everything we've learned so far about PHP constants. Data types and magic constants. In PHP, understanding data types is one of the most important fundamentals. A data type simply means the classification or category of data based on what kind of value it holds. For example, numbers belong to one type, text belongs to another, and true or false values belong to a different one. This classification helps PHP understand how to process and store each value in memory. Now, PHP is known as a loosely typed language. This means you don't have to explicitly tell PHP what type of variable you're creating. Unlike strongly typed languages such as Java or C++, where you must declare a variable type like int, float, or string, PHP automatically figures out the data type on its own. It looks at the value you assign and then decides the correct type behind the scenes. For example, if you write AX barber 10, hello world, PHP understands that AX is an integer and AY is a string, even though you never mentioned their types. There are many data types in PHP, but the most common ones are integer, float, string, and Boolean. In addition to these, PHP also supports compound data types, such as arrays and objects, which can hold multiple values or complex structures. PHP also provides a wide range of built-in functions that work with these data types, functions that handle strings, numbers, mathematical operations, and even special constants like nan, which stands for not a number. Now, let's connect this to constants, which we explored earlier. In PHP, a constant is an identifier, basically a name that stores a fixed value. Once you define a constant, its value cannot be changed during the execution of the script. Constants are ideal for storing values that remain the same throughout the program, like configuration details, site names, or mathematical constants such as pi. You can define constants using the define function or the const keyword. And remember, constants are automatically global, which means you can use them anywhere in your script. And finally, we talked about magic constants, one of PHP's most powerful features. Magic constants are predefined by PHP itself, and their values change automatically depending on where and how they are used. These include constants like line, file, dir, function, and several others. They help developers get contextual information about their code, such as the file name, line number, or function name, at runtime. Unlike normal constants that have fixed values, magic constants are dynamic, meaning their values change with context. For example, line R will show a different number depending on which line it's written on. So, in summary, PHP classifies values into data types based on their characteristics. It's a loosely typed language, so you don't need to define variable types manually. It supports both simple data types like integers and strings, and compound types like arrays and objects. PHP provides many built-in functions to manipulate data types efficiently. Constants in PHP hold fixed values that cannot be changed once defined, and they are accessible globally. Magic constants are special predefined constants that change their values automatically depending on where they are used in the code. Together, these features make PHP a powerful, flexible, and developer-friendly language that allows for both simple and complex programming, all while maintaining clarity and ease of use.